Good morning, Father's House. How you doing this weekend? Yeah, we're doing good. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving? I mean, Thanksgiving's fantastic, right? I realized, that I don't like, especially in this time of year, selling Christmas trees and all that stuff, I don't Sabbath a whole lot. Like, I don't rest a lot in Thanksgiving. I just, rested, and it was so nice. Speaking of Thanksgiving and eating a bunch and resting, January 1st, we're going to start a 21-day fast for our church. I was texting somebody about it Thanksgiving morning, and I said, I'll be sure to get you a copy before lunch today, because we have some books available. If you're not familiar with fasting, this is a great resource for you, and they're available at the welcome table. But I would encourage you, it's a pretty easy read, but man, once you start, as you get into the book, it's Pastor Jensen Franklin wrote it, and he starts sharing some testimonies, and it becomes really easy to read, because it's super fun to read, this is what God has done in the past. And I'm believing for some really amazing things at Father's House in 2024, and I think we can start that off by just saying, God, I'm surrendering the first of the year to you, right? We say on Sunday, so yeah, we're going to start a series, Running with Giants, the Nativity. And I did a series a couple years ago, called Running with Giants, and just with some random Bible characters. But this one, we're specifically looking at nativity figures, and today we're going to look at Mary. But really, the series is based in Hebrews chapter 12, therefore. And he's referring to Hebrews chapter 11. That's the Hall of Fame of faith, and the author of Hebrews talks about all these great men and women in the Bible that were full of faith. And so he says, therefore, since we're surrounded by these amazing men and women of faith, such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. I'm a big track and field guy. If you've attended Father's House for very long at all, you know that this coming year is a Summer Olympics year. And man, I love the Summer Olympics. Summer Olympics are the one time every 4 years that track and field is on television. We can watch guys run 5,000 or 10,000 meters, and it's just wonderful, right? No? Nobody else finds that fun? Nobody else thinks it's amazing that somebody can run 6 miles and every mile's at 4.5 minutes. That's insane to me. 6 miles and every mile's at 4.5 minutes. That's insane to me. But anyway, Paul often references our Christian witnesses that we're surrounded with could come and run one lap of our race with us. What would they say? 25 laps. We're not going to go through 25 Bible characters. We're just going to cover a few. But today we're going to ask, if Mary could run one lap of our life race with us, what would she say? How would she encourage us? And as we go through the series, you'll see there's one phrase that the angel says to each one of these people. To Mary, he says, don't be afraid, for you have found favor with God. But the first thing that Gabriel, the angel, says, one of only 2 angels named in the Bible, he says, don't be afraid. That's the first thing he says to Mary. Next week, we're going to talk about Joseph, and the first thing he says to Joseph, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife. And then on December 10th, we're going to talk about the shepherds, the only other people that we know were at the nativity, the wise men. If you didn't know, they come along a little bit later. But to the shepherds, he says, do not be afraid. I bring you good news. And I think so many of us, when God is talking to us, apparently fear is triggered in us, a fear emotion, right? Because it's throughout the Bible, when angels talk to people or when God talks to people, it's the most common thing that they say. Don't be afraid. Fear not. So what would Mary then say to us? How would she translate that to us? She would say, don't be afraid of what God is asking you to do. See, someone is coming now that God's asking you to do something, and you know how it is when you see someone coming toward you that they know they want something from you, right? Like you're about to sit down to dinner and you get the knock, and it's a couple of young men with ties and little name tags, and like, just pretend we're not home. Like, I don't want, or you see like you're in the grocery store and you're in a hurry on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and everyone in Bend is at Safeway, and you look down the aisle and you know, like, man, if I get caught, I'm going to be here forever, and you just avoid that. Or the best ones for me are like MLM stuff, when it's like, hey, we want to have you over for dinner and talk to you about an opportunity. No, I don't want to do that. And so whenever somebody's coming to us that we know is going to, like, they want something from us, that we avoid them. And I think we have the same thing from God, that if we open ourselves up to God, what if God asks some really big things of us? What if, like, God wants me to go to Africa? Like, I don't want to go to Africa. What if God asks me to give something up? What if God asks me to marry someone that's ugly? We do all these what ifs, right? And we say, what if? And fear, though, is the opposite of faith. And God calls us to have faith. Faith in those what ifs. What if I lose my job? What if I do marry a jerk? What if I marry a jerk and we have kids together and our kids are jerks because they're being raised by a jerk? What if my phone dies? It's amazing. My biggest fear response nowadays has to do with fear, or with phones. And it's that, like, if Crystal's phone dies, my mind goes, like, in the weirdest places. She was somewhere not too long ago, and her phone died. I didn't know that it died. What I knew is that her location didn't change from where she was, and time went on, and she wasn't texting, she wasn't, like, checking in, and she wasn't responding to my texts, and like, did she get in a car wreck? Did something bad happen? What's going on? And finally, like, she rolls into the house, and I said, what's going on? What's happening? I've been scared, I've been worried this whole time. She said, oh, my phone died. Can you take a charger? Like, do something. Do something, because, like, immediately, it's all those what ifs, and we have those fears. What if the economy falls apart? What if I get sick, like really sick? Or what if I never get married? It's the spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And I love the way the New Living Translation puts it, because I'm used to this, for God has not given us a spirit of what other people are going to think, a spirit of fear of doing anything, a spirit of fear and, like, closing in. But he's given us power and love and self-discipline. These are the things that God's given us. And it can be so afraid of, is that God says, no, I can't do that. We're going to talk about Mary. She's like cousin, and she's pregnant with the man that will one day be John the Baptist. But God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you. That's, like, amazing, right? How'd you like to be, like, greeted that way? Greetings, favored woman. Greetings, favored man, the Lord is with you. Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think of what the angel could mean. See, we have this idea that angels are bald little babies playing harps on clouds. But the reality is, the way the Bible describes them, they're fierce creatures, and they're called to destroy God's enemies and protect children. And she's engaged to be married. So she's probably, her mind is not there. If we're fast forwarding a couple thousand years, Mary is like neck deep in Pinterest at this point. She's thinking about, how am I going to sign my new last name? Practicing her signature. She's brainstorming names for kids. What am I going to name my kids? How many kids do we want to have? And then God interrupts her. He says, I know that you're engaged, but you have found favor with God. And what what we oftentimes see as interruptions, God is using as invitations in our lives. And God interrupted Moses. Moses was minding his own business and tending sheep, and there was a burning bush. Jonah was, doing his thing, and God said, hey, I want you to go to Nineveh. And Jonah said no, and then God said, I'm putting you in a fish, and made him do it. It was an interruption. It wasn't what Jonah was looking to do. Saul, who later became Paul, was on his way to persecute Christians, and Jesus met him on the road. They're interruptions that change the course of history. When your friend, most of you are probably here because at some point somebody invited you to church. That's an interruption, right? I'm at the age now where I couldn't be late for a 10 o'clock appointment if my life depended on it. Like, I've been up for several hours, whether I want to or not. But some of you, it's like, man, 10 a.m., like, I just want to sleep in on Sundays. This is an interruption. You get a call that your friend's in the hospital and you need to go visit them. That's an interruption. We get interrupted with things sometimes, but if we'll just step into the interruption and see it as God inviting us into this space. In verse 30, the angel says, don't be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Do you want favor with God? Man, I don't know what Mary was doing for the first part of her life, but whatever she was doing it right. You have found favor. As he says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of this interruption. Don't be afraid of what God's calling you to do or where God's moving you. All right, if God's moving you in a direction, if God's calling you to something, it's because he trusts you to do it. And where you fall short, because you will fall short, that's where we lean in to Jesus. Like, don't wait for this thing that you can wrap your mind around to walk in and step in and say, okay, this is an invitation that I can get on board with because I can do this. I can handle this. But the thing is, if we only ever do the things that we can handle or the things we can wrap our minds around, then we have no need for God. God doesn't call us, and I've teased about this before, but there is no verse, and we like to think that there's a verse, but it's not there. Look for it. I read all 66 books of the Bible. I promise, do it. I'd love for you to read all 66 books of the Bible. And look for the verse that says, God will not give you anything more than you can handle. It's not there, but I would love for you to search for it. Just start in Genesis, read all the way through Revelation. Let me know when you find it. Because God absolutely will give you more than you can handle. But that's where he meets us. That's where he meets us, is when we get to the end of ourselves and we say, okay, God, I can't handle this anymore. He says, I know. Just take my hand. I'll lead you through. The second reason I think that we get afraid of God's calling in our lives is that God's purpose is often different than our plans. In verse 31 of Luke chapter 1, it says, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end. Wow. I mean, that's big, right? Like, you're going to conceive and give birth to a son. But you got to know that wasn't part of Mary's plan, right? She was engaged, and she was like, I'm engaged, we're going to get married. She was probably like a mid-teenager in that culture, in that time. Like, as soon as a young girl hit puberty, they were getting married. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm real glad things have changed in the last couple thousand years. But God says, you're going to conceive, you're going to have a son, you're going to call him Jesus, and he's going to reign, and he's going to rule. He's the Messiah. His kingdom will never end. But man, that was not in her plans. Like I said, she was like thinking about wedding plans, and she was thinking about her future, and she was thinking about Joseph. And God said, okay, but hold on. So he's going to give birth, and the things that had to be going through her mind were, what are people going to think about me? I'm not married. I'm a virgin. Nobody's going to believe that. What's Joseph going to think about me? And what I want you to remember is that just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so his ways are higher than your ways. His ways are higher than our ways. And we may see this stuff as like it's not in our plans. It's not in our plans to have a kid with special needs. It's not in our plans to lose our job and to have to start over from scratch. Some things just aren't in our plans. I have an aunt that became a missionary and moved to Mozambique when she was in her 60s. I don't think that was in her plans. But she was like, man, this is what I feel like God's telling me to do. I need to do that. So in verse 34, Mary asked the angel, but how can this happen? I'm a virgin. So this was not just impossible. This was absurd. Right? I mean, like, there's impossible, like, yeah, that can't happen. And then there's like, no. That's insane. That's absurd. That's completely out of the question. And to quote one of my favorite movies, Princess Bride, it's inconceivable that this could ever happen. I don't understand. How will my marriage survive? How will I heal? How will we pay the bills? How are we going to survive this situation? How are we going to, God, I don't see this. Doesn't just seem impossible, God. This feels absurd. Sometimes when God has a purpose for your life, sometimes when God's calling you, I think Mary would say, yeah. It seems impossible. I've been there. Like Mary would say, I've been there. I've been in this spot that's like, I don't understand this. This is you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. For the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God. And in verse 37, it says, nothing is impossible with God. Nothing's impossible with God. Can you change your spouse? No, probably not. Can God change your spouse? Definitely. Absolutely. Can you heal somebody? No. Can God heal somebody? Absolutely. Can you save your unsaved friends and family? No. You can't do that. God can save your unsaved friends and family. Nothing is impossible with God. And that's where we need to find ourselves, guys, is that when we think we're up against the impossible, remembering it's not my job. And we're going to talk about that. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I made sure it worked this time. In your app, there are notes. I pulled this move off like a month and a half ago, and it did not land because the notes didn't populate. I made sure this morning that they're there. But in the apps, in the Father's House app, in the notes, there's this blank, there's a question with a little bubble there that you can fill in. You can email all your notes to yourself. It's really cool. But I want you to answer this question either there or somewhere else. Write it down. What is God asking you to do or believe? What's God asking you to do or believe? Is there something outlandish that God's asking you to do? Is there something outlandish that God's asking you to believe? One of my favorite verses in the Bible, and I've been praying this verse a whole lot recently. He comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and there's a demon-possessed boy, and Jesus is talking with the dad, and he says, do you believe to the dad? And the dad says, I do believe. Help my unbelief. See, it's okay to say, there's areas that I struggle. I don't know how I believe this. I want to believe, Jesus. God, I want to believe that if you call me to a purpose, I want to believe that if you set a plan or a chart out, a path for my life, I want to believe that it's best. And I want to believe that you're going to make a way, but there's parts of me that don't trust that. Help me. Help me. So answer that question. What is God asking you to do, or what is God asking you to believe? Remember, the core tenet of our faith is that we believe Jesus was born of a virgin. Absurd. That's insanity. And we believe that he died, and 3 days later he rose from the dead. Also insane. But we believe, that's like core to it. Without those, there is no Christianity. Without either one of them, there is no Christianity. If somehow science revealed that Jesus never rose from the dead, we're done then, right? So we believe those things. But we don't believe that God can make ends meet. We struggle to believe that God cares for our children as much as we care for our children. We struggle to believe that he's got a career or a spouse or whatever planned out for our lives, that his purposes are better than our purposes. We believe he was born of a virgin. We believe that he died and rose again. We don't believe that he can heal our marriage. What's God asking you to believe? You already believe, if you've given your life to Christ, you already believe two pretty crazy things. So it's not going to get more crazy than believing that Jesus was born to a virgin. And this gets so easily forgotten because it's just part of the Christmas story. And we worship the holiday. We forget about God and what it really means. That Jesus was born of a virgin. That's crazy. What else can we believe then? If we really believe that, what else can we believe? So what's our response? What's your response when God asks you to do something or believe something? The first thing that you need to remember is the outcome is God's responsibility. Don't worry about the outcome. Like I said, we tend to trust when it's convenient. We tend to trust when okay, I can see the next 3 miles of my race. The neat thing about doing laps around a track is that you can only see a little bit ahead of you at a time. If you're on a straight stretch, you get 100 meters. If you're on a corner, you don't even get that. You can only see what's right in front of you. If you run, I ran cross country in high school and college, and then you don't even get that. You get I can see to the tree. Don't worry about the end of the race. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about what will happen, because obedience is your responsibility. God doesn't call you to control the outcome. God doesn't call you. His purpose for you is not to have this perfect outcome, this perfect marriage, this perfect